These stories are dark. If you're looking for light and fluffy, look elsewhere. Hey, it's Just the Gems. I'm Brandon, and I don't know about you, but I'm not always in the mood for an uplifting tale of heroism and friendship and love conquering all. Sometimes I just want to wallow in the mud like an emotionally broken pig. You're looking at a guy that wrote dark and twisted Hey Arnold fan fiction in his youth. Don't even try and out-emo me. Being a JRPG lover, it can sometimes be hard to find a truly heavy story to slake that particular thirst. Let's be honest, a lot of JRPGs are all about the power of friendship, and yeah, some of my all-time favorites are like that, but like I said, sometimes you just need some bitter to cut through all that sweet. These are 9 JRPGs that should do the trick. Starting off with a bang, Shin Megami Tensei 3 Nocturne is the first SMT game we got over here. Well, that's not actually true. We did get Jack Brothers on the Virtual Boy, and that's technically an SMT game. But this is the first game to actually capture the spirit of SMT that made its way west, so that's worth something, I think. This is a game about the end of the world, which is already a pretty dark topic. But it's not a quest to try and save the world, because the dang thing gets exploded like 30 minutes in. No, you're not trying to save it, you're actually trying to remake it. You, as the silent main character, get turned into a demon before the world goes kablooey. Not an entire demon, but sort of a half demon. A demi-fiend, if you will. And now you're sort of the person standing in the gap between the few remaining humans and the demons that have suddenly appeared and taken over everything. This is a game that tells its story super effectively with very little dialogue. There are other characters you'll meet, a few friends you make along the way, but they're not traveling with you. Your party is made up of demons you convince to help you out. So the characterization is actually pretty low, which for me is typically something I'm not a big fan of, but this game manages to somehow do it right. The vibes tell most of the story, which is a weird thing to say, but when you play it, you just feel it. Like, it's a story you absorb through your skin, not through your eyes and ears. I don't know, I'm not explaining it very well. It's largely an experiential thing. You can kind of summarize the story in like 2 sentences, but to fully get it, you really just have to experience it. It's just you and a bunch of demons wandering around a dark, mostly abandoned world, soaking in the atmosphere, and trying to decide which ideological side you fall on. Are you with God? Are you with the devil? Are you with someone else entirely? Everyone has their own idea of what the world should be, and SMT3 ultimately asks you to take in its messed up world and come to your own conclusions. Thankfully, this game got a remaster a few years back, so it's super accessible. Definitely give it a try. It's notoriously difficult, just like most SMT games, but the remaster definitely helps tone that down, so even if you're not a hardcore SMT person, it should definitely be doable. In the intro, I said 9 JRPGs in this video, but really it's 10, because Shin Megami Tensei Digital Devil Saga is broken up over 2 complete games. Part 1 takes place in a world that is basically one step removed from literal hell. It's a burnout battlefield where a bunch of warring tribes have been fighting for generations, and it's not even clear if anyone knows why they're fighting at all. After a particularly nasty battle, this mysterious girl appears out of nowhere, and suddenly you and your friends are transforming into horrifying monsters that just want to eat everyone. Naturally, this girl holds the key to figuring out what's going on with you, as well as what's going on with the world at large. The second game takes place in, well, actually, wait. I can't say anything about the second game because it's a direct continuation that picks up right after the big revelation at the end of part 1. But suffice it to say, even if you see it coming, it's still a really crazy cool twist. For me, this takes a lot of what I love about the mainline Shin Megami Tensei series, like the aesthetics and the vibe and the heavy, heavy dark stories, and pairs it with way more interesting characters. I love SMT3 Nocturne, but it's hard to argue that it has a bunch of really compelling characters, or even if you think they're interesting, they don't get much screen time, so you barely have a chance to appreciate them. Your team here is made up of fully formed people, and getting to know them as you all navigate this completely messed up situation is really cool. It's beyond bonkers to me that Atlus hasn't given us a remaster of this one yet. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad we got Raito remastered, but if I were them, I wouldn't have started there. I would have started right here. I could also put the original Nier in this category, or like the remake, Nier Replicant version 1. Blah, de blah, blah, because A, it's also super dark and twisted, and B, there are some really cool payoffs in Automata if you've played that game first. But honestly, if you're only going to play one, I have to recommend the sequel. The first game already takes place in the distant future, but Nier Automata jumps the timeline forward significantly. We're talking like the year 12,000. At that point, it shouldn't be any surprise that the world of Nier Automata doesn't really look much like our world today. The whole premise is that Earth was invaded at some point between the two games by aliens who left a whole bunch of evil robots there to do their bidding, and humanity has been shuttled off to safety on the moon. They left behind a bunch of androids to take care of the robots and get Earth ready for them to return. Unfortunately, the fight has been dragging on for a long, long time. Over that much time, even androids are apt to start getting all existential and whatnot. And that's really the draw of Nier Automata for me. It's a story about humanity that doesn't involve humans. The androids are basically human in everything except body, but they insist on operating according to their protocols to serve masters that, for all intents and purposes, have abandoned them. The alien robots, too, they're starting to develop something like sentience, and they're forming little civilizations and experiencing the same sort of growth humanity did throughout history. As the story unfolds, the game hits you with twist after twist, and it has no qualms about knifing you in the back in the effort to create a strong emotional payoff. And it ends with one of the most genuinely moving acts of sacrifice that I think any of us as players can make. It's truly one of the biggest narrative achievements in video games, and based on the recent 9-year anniversary post, it seems like we might finally be getting more from Nier in the near future. Get it? Those two words, they sound the same. Wordplay. Murder, torture, abject horror. These aren't just words to describe the feeling of being stuck in line behind someone with a shopping cart full of returns and a rotten attitude towards retail workers. They also play a huge role in Koudelka, which is possibly the strangest game on this very strange list. Koudelka is a PlayStation 1 game that takes place in our world, or a version of our world that's more magical anyway, in the late 1800s. Koudelka herself is a Romany girl who finds herself mystically drawn to this ancient monastery that's been converted into a mansion for some messed up rich people. And after they try and kill her, she decides to set everything right. Along the way, she teams up with a smooth-talking adventurer named Edward and a Catholic priest named James, whose collar seems a bit too tight. They make an extremely unlikely trio, and this game is an extremely unlikely mixture of turn-based RPG combat and Resident Evil-style survival horror exploration. The story here is the real draw, despite the other elements being, at the very least, interesting, because you'll absolutely want to see what happens over the course of this one long night. Somehow we're dealing with massive church conspiracies, ghosts, crazy magical experiments. It's nuts. One area that I feel like is a real highlight is in the presentation of the story. Yeah, this is a game with lower res models against static backgrounds, but the character interactions are often fully motion captured, as in they had the actors actually on a stage performing the scene in mocap gear, and that makes its way directly into the game. It's something you just never saw done at the time, and it goes a long way toward making the story feel impactful. This one is definitely worth checking out. Keep in mind that gameplay is very slow, but I'm sure you enterprising internet users could find a way to circumvent that problem. You know, wink. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say wink, I was just supposed to. Shadow Hearts, like Koudelka, is one of those rare JRPGs that takes place in a version of our real world. This is pre-World War I Europe and Asia, and it's honestly so interesting to see a fantastical version of reality in a game like this. It really makes me wish there were more. Not just more Shadow Hearts, though that would be awesome, but I mean more games like it. It seems like the Shadow Hearts' spiritual successor, Pennyblood, is either dead or stuck in development hell. There goes my $100. So chances are it'll be a while before we get another game like this. But that's neither here nor there. Shadow Hearts is about Yuri and Alice, two people caught up in some crazy events that lead directly into the First World War. Yuri is a harmonixer, which basically means he can turn into monsters, and also he's very emo. Appropriate for this video, right? And Alice is an exorcist who a bunch of powerful people want to get their hands on for a purpose that would be a capital S spoiler, so I won't get into it. Yuri and Alice and the team they cobble together make their way across Asia and Europe in order to stop an evil sorcerer. And if all this setup wasn't cool enough, the game is actually the storyline sequel and spiritual successor to the PlayStation 1 hidden gem Koudelka. Koudelka herself even shows up as a pretty significant character. Man, I just love games with interconnected stories, and I love it even more when the creators don't go out of their way to draw attention to it. Like, they could have called this Koudelka 2 or something, but they didn't. Anyway, this game definitely fits the dark and twisted theme, although there are quite a few laugh out loud moments too. That's an underappreciated aspect of the best dark fiction, I think. You have to use surgical precision to cut through the tension with some good comic relief every now and then, or you risk actually depressing your audience. Shadow Hearts, and honestly its sequel, Shadow Hearts Covenant 2, they just tell a really compelling story that you absolutely should check out if you can. There have been a lot of dark games on this list, but not many of them have started with an entire theater of opera lovers spontaneously combusting. That would be an extremely weird plot detail to see in more than one game, so I guess it's good it's just in this one. But Parasite Eve comes out swinging, and it gives us another game set in the real world. This time it's not some magical reimagination of reality, it's just New York City. You are Aya Brea, a cop who's absolutely slaying in some formal wear and out for a hot Christmas Eve date with a random hunk who doesn't matter. And then some pseudoscience happens and suddenly the world is under attack. And the creatures attacking us are our own cells. Little jerks. Specifically our mitochondria. If you don't know what mitochondria are, well, I'm not going to be of much help. I goofed off in biology, but I was one of those lovable goof-offs, you know, the kind that the teacher scolds but secretly thinks is just a really cool kid. That's the story I've constructed for myself anyway. Sorry, Mr. Bus. You did your best. But basically, it doesn't matter. All you need to know is that someone or something is leading all the mitochondria in a rebellion against humanity. That would be the titular Eve of Parasite Eve fame. Because this is a disaster of heretofore unheard of proportions, the entire city of New York is evacuated, except for a small, intrepid police force that are staying behind to take Eve down. Aya makes her way around various New York landmarks to take down a bunch of grotesque abominations. This is a pretty brief JRPG, which might be a good thing, depending on your preferences, and it's extremely cinematic. That was actually how they build it in the first place. Square got its first taste of cinema with the cutscenes in Final Fantasy VII, and they were ready to unleash even more on the world. And so they lit a theater of people on fire and gave us an instant classic for the PlayStation 1. If you're a JRPG fan and you haven't played it, you should at least give it a try. It's such an interesting piece of video game history, and its story is perfectly twisted. Crystar is definitely the sort of game you play for the story. If that sounds like damning with faint praise, it's because it is. But the praise is legitimate. The storytelling in Crystar is top-notch, and it's one of the most twisted stories I've experienced in modern gaming. It follows Rei, who gets sucked into purgatory along with her little sister. They've already had a tragic enough life as it is. They lost both of their parents, and now they're in purgatory? And they're not even dead yet, which is extra weird. Well, Rei isn't, at least, but she inadvertently causes the death of her sister while they're in purgatory, so that sucks for her. The only way Rei will have a chance of bringing her back is by making a deal with some devils. They want her to go around purgatory and kill off a bunch of restless spirits. If she's thorough enough, then sure, they'll bring the kid back to life. But I mean, these are devils, right? Like, if you're a kid with even a passing knowledge of culture, you should probably be at least a little suspicious about anything a self-declared demon tells you. But I guess we wouldn't have had a game then, so Rei goes along with it. And while she's fighting, she meets up with 3 other girls who are in different but equally tragic situations of their own. They've all signed contracts too, and so they team up to take down the bad guys. Or are they bad? I mean, it's a good question. The story here starts out as a pretty straightforward tale of trying to resurrect a dead kid's sister, but it pretty quickly starts hitting you with twist after insane twist. It's honestly shocking how often I had to gather up my chin off the floor with this freaking game. Even though the gameplay and environments are, let's say, on the weaker side, the story and characters more than redeem this in my mind. They're that good. Another solid entry to this list would have been Final Fantasy Tactics. Come to think of it, why didn't I put that in here? Oh right, because I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm doing. Thanks for watching, though. Really appreciate it. But Tactics gets a little bit of representation because Vagrant Story is the second game to take place in the world of Ivalice, which we didn't know how to pronounce back in the 90s, by the way. I thought it was Ivalice, which sounds like something a British person with an itchy scalp who doesn't understand plural nouns might say. Vagrant Story is about Ashley Riot, which would be a perfect name for the lead singer of a pop punk band, but is also a great name for a risk breaker, which is basically a knight who gets sent in to take care of the really tough jobs. Ashley is accused of murdering a duke, and on top of clearing his name, he needs to hunt down this cult leader named Sydney to figure out how he's connected to the government of Valendia. So yeah, like Final Fantasy Tactics before it and Final Fantasy XII after it, this is a darkly political story. But Ashley isn't running around with a group of allies fighting monsters. This is largely a solo affair. Though he'll run into other people occasionally as he makes his way through the ruined city of Leomond, you're mostly left with Ashley by himself, just sort of soaking up the dark atmosphere. This game was a marvel of storytelling at the time it came out. Even by today's standards, I feel like this would be something a super talented indie developer would come up with. The characters are blocky in that late PlayStation 1 sort of way, but their faces are ridiculously detailed, something the devs pulled off with textures since they couldn't really up the polygon count. And the writing in this one. Alexander O. Smith led the localization, and he really set out to make something that was straight out of Shakespeare with this. He pulled it off. Remember, this was an era when video games still sometimes sounded like they were run through Bing Translate before it became sentient and tried to coerce a reporter into leaving his wife. Meaning, localizations could still be pretty bad. But this one outright sings. If you can handle the intense difficulty spikes, and I'll admit, I can't. But it's worth giving a try because this game is just absolutely beautiful and twisted in such a unique way. And hey, I'm not necessarily putting money on it, but the fact that the new Final Fantasy Tactics remake was called the Ivalice Chronicles makes me think that maybe, possibly, we might see more of Vagrant Story in the not too distant future. You need more than one chronicle to make a Chronicles, right? I saved maybe the darkest and twistiest for lastest. I once described Omori as trigger warning the game, and I stand by that. This is a game that isn't twisted because it involves ancient wizards sacrificing innocents to resurrect a dark god. This is a game that's twisted because of how real it is. And that's even taking into account that at least half of it takes place inside someone's imagination. Omori tells the story of a little boy who lives in a fantasy world with all his friends and a bunch of anthropomorphized animals and trash cans and cassette tapes, and really just anything can be alive. It's also the story of a boy named Sunny who lives in our modern day world and who refuses to leave his house in the suburbs for reasons unknown. You don't have to think too hard to figure out the connection here, and to be fair, the game doesn't really try to hide it. Switching between the two worlds, you'll start to piece together the tragedy that broke Sunny's life and scattered his friends to the winds. And it'll start to make sense why Sunny doesn't want to leave his house, or why Omori's friend Basil suddenly disappears. I'm not gonna lie, as someone who's personally been through some heavy stuff, this game will really punch you in the gut. That's kind of where I was coming from with the whole trigger warning the game thing. Of course, different people have different experiences, and the level of, let's say, simulated trauma they want to partake in is going to vary. But for me, I find exploring these super dark subjects in a game to be therapeutic. Depression, anxiety, life-ending grief, these are all real things, and Omori gives us a place to work through them. It's not a therapist, obviously, it's not replacement for actual therapy, but there's something really useful to me about a mirror. It's not a perfect reflection, but it let me see some things I wouldn't have been able to see otherwise. If you can stomach it, I definitely recommend you give this one a play. It's heavy, but it's heavy in the best way. There you go. That's 9 or I guess 10 games with super dark storylines. What do you think? Any that I missed? Let me know down in the comments. I already mentioned a couple throughout that I stupidly left off the list, so I'm sure that there's more. I'll definitely want to talk more about this in the future, so drop me your recommendations, please. Thanks so much for watching, and thanks to everyone who's subscribed. It really means a lot, and it helps me and the channel out so much. Oh, and if you're interested in JRPGs and you aren't already subscribed to my podcast, please consider checking that out too. It's called the JRPG Pursuit. We put out new episodes every week. Link is in the description. All right, see you later.